My celebration dinner for my engagement to my beloved quickly became a suffocating tribunal as my sister, the golden child, used her status to overshadow my joy. The air in my parents' formal dining room was thick enough to carve. It was supposed to be a celebration, our celebration. Just 2 weeks earlier, I had asked Daniel, the love of my life, to marry me. He'd said yes, and for those 2 weeks, I'd been floating. But the moment we stepped over the threshold of my childhood home, that feeling evaporated, replaced by the familiar, suffocating humidity of my family's expectations. The dinner meant to honor us felt more like a tribunal, and I knew with a certainty that settled like a stone in my gut who the chief prosecutor would be. My sister Avery. To understand Avery, you have to understand the universe my parents created. It's a small, meticulously curated galaxy where only one sun is allowed to shine, and that sun has always been her. At 27, 2 years my junior, she was the golden child, a title she wore not like a crown, but like a weapon. She was the one with the perfect grades, the prestigious job, and the effortless charm that seemed to hypnotize our parents into a state of perpetual adoration. I, at 29, was the moon orbiting, reflecting, and ultimately existing only in her shadow. Tonight, the gravitational pull was stronger than ever. Daniel and I were seated at the long mahogany table, the polished wood reflecting the cold light of the crystal chandelier above. My mother had used the good china, the kind reserved for holidays and funerals. It felt like we were at a strange combination of both. Daniel, bless his heart, was trying his best. At 30, he's a man who is comfortable in any room with an easy confidence that I've always admired. But even he was struggling to find purchase on the slippery surface of my family's polite hostility. He'd complimented my mother's cooking, asked my father about his golf game, and tried to engage Avery in a conversation about her work. Each attempt was met with a thin, brittle smile and a response that shut the door as quickly as he'd opened it. We felt less like the guests of honor and more like exhibits at a museum. My parents would ask a question about the wedding plans, but their eyes would immediately flick to Avery, gauging her reaction before they'd even fully processed our answer. It was a dance I'd known my whole life. Thomas proposes an idea. The family looks to Avery for approval. It was exhausting. Avery, for her part, was playing her favorite role, the concerned sister. She'd mastered the art of wrapping insults in the silken cloth of solicitude. "The ring is beautiful, Daniel," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness as she gestured a perfectly manicured hand towards his. "Thomas has good taste, a little extravagant maybe. I just hope you two are being sensible with your finances. Starting a life together is so expensive." It sounded like practical advice, but I heard the subtext loud and clear. Asterisk Thomas is irresponsible. Thomas is reckless with money. You, Daniel, are the sensible one, being dragged into his mess. Daniel, ever loyal, just smiled warmly. "We're doing just fine, Avery, and it was worth every penny." He squeezed my hand under the table, a small anchor in the churning sea of my family's dysfunction. My father cleared his throat, eager to steer the conversation onto what he considered firmer ground. "Well, a marriage is the cornerstone of a family. It's a sacred commitment, a promise to build a future, to carry on a legacy." He beamed, but the beam wasn't aimed at me and Daniel. It was aimed, as always, at Avery. "We can't wait for the day you bring home a fine young man, sweetheart, to give us grandchildren. It's life's greatest blessing." I felt a muscle in my jaw twitch. There it was, the traditional family values speech polished and presented like a holy relic. The sanctity of marriage, the sacred duty of procreation, the legacy of the Jimenez name. It was the bedrock of their belief system. And sitting right across from me, nodding with pious agreement, was the keeper of a secret so profound it would shatter that bedrock into a million pieces. She had come to me, not our parents. 5 years ago, when she was 22, her perfect world had fractured, and it was my shoulder she cried on. She confessed everything, not just about what had just happened, but about the first time when she was only 19. Then just 2 years ago, when she was 25, it happened again. Each time I was the only one she told. I held her secrets. I carried the weight of her choices while she continued to wear the flawless mask of the perfect daughter. And now she was using that same trust as a license to dismantle the happiest moment of my life. Her next volley was aimed directly at our engagement timeline. "It all just seems so sudden," she mused, swirling the wine in her glass and avoiding my gaze. "You've only been together, what, 3 years? Are you sure you're not just rushing into things? I'd hate to see you get hurt, Thomas. You can be so impulsive." 3 years. To her, 3 years of building a life with a man I adored was rushing. In those 3 years, we had built a home together, weathered job changes and family illnesses. We had a history, a foundation. But in Avery's narrative, I was a flighty child, and Daniel was a prize I'd snatched up too quickly. "We're very sure, Avery," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "When you know, you know." "Of course," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "It's just, Daniel is so established. A partner at his firm, a beautiful home. He's the complete package. It's wonderful that he's willing to, take on so much." The insult was barely veiled. Asterisk, Daniel is successful. You are not. He is lowering himself to be with you. My accomplishments, my career, my life, they were all rendered invisible next to the blinding light of Avery's ambition and Daniel's perceived status. To her, my relationship wasn't a partnership. It was a heist. Daniel, bless him, tried to diffuse it with grace. "Thomas and I are a team, Avery. We take on everything together. That's what a partnership is." But Avery wouldn't be deterred. She saw an opening. She saw our parents listening intently, their biases already leaning in her favor. She saw me, the brother who had always eventually deferred to her. She thought she was in control. She had no idea that the secrets she'd entrusted to me were a bomb I'd been carrying for her. And with every passive-aggressive jab, she was daring me to light the fuse. I looked across the table at the woman I once thought I knew. The scared 19-year-old. The distraught 22-year-old. The panicked 25-year-old. I had held her hand through her darkest moments, offering silent support and an unbreakable promise of secrecy. I had guarded her reality so she could live in her fantasy. And her thanks was this public dissection of my happiness, this attempt to poison the one good thing in my life. The irony was so bitter I could taste it. She was attacking the very foundation of my future, completely oblivious to the fact that I held the detonator to hers. And as the dinner wore on and her attacks grew bolder, I could feel my thumb beginning to twitch over the button. The silence that followed Daniel's polite shutdown was thick and suffocating. It wasn't an empty silence, but a heavy one packed with unspoken thoughts. My mother shifted in her chair, a nervous flutter of her hands on her napkin. My father cleared his throat, looking at his plate as if it held the secrets to navigating this sudden minefield. Avery, however, seemed to thrive in it. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her wine, her eyes glittering with a kind of predatory calm. She wasn't diffused, she was just reloading. And then she did it. With a delicate tink-tink-tink of her knife against her crystal glass, she commanded the room. The sound cut through the tension like a shard of ice. Every head turned towards her. She rose from her chair, a vision of grace and poise, the prodigal daughter about to bestow a blessing. But I knew better. I saw the look in her eye. This wasn't a blessing, it was a eulogy for my happiness. "I'd just like to say a few words," she began, her voice smooth as silk, wrapping around the room like a velvet rope. She raised her glass first, gesturing towards me and Daniel. "I want to toast my big brother Thomas." My stomach clenched. Here it comes. "I am so truly happy for him." She continued, her words spaced for maximum dramatic effect. "We all know Thomas has had his struggles, finding his path. He's always been the more artistic one, the dreamer." The words sounded like compliments, but they were expertly crafted daggers. Artistic was code for unstable. Dreamer was code for unsuccessful. She was painting me as a charity case, a lost puppy Daniel had graciously taken in. And to see him finally find someone like Daniel, someone so grounded, so successful, so complete, well, it's just a relief for all of us. I could feel Daniel stiffen beside me. He knew exactly what she was doing. He reached under the table and squeezed my hand, a silent message of solidarity. I held on like a drowning man. Avery then turned that full force of her radiant smile on Daniel. "And Daniel, welcome to the family. Truly, when I first met you, I have to admit I was blown away. Your ambition, your intelligence, the way you carry yourself. You are without a doubt a cornerstone. The kind of man who builds empires, who secures a future." She was no longer talking about my fiancé. She was describing an asset. She was reading off the specifications of a prize she had her eye on. My parents were completely enraptured. My mother was nodding, a proud little smile on her face, as if Avery's praise of Daniel somehow reflected back on her. My father looked impressed, seeing Daniel not as my future husband, but as a portfolio of desirable traits. Avery had them. She was playing them like a fiddle, plucking the strings of their deepest desires for legacy and status. The toast began to pivot slowly, expertly. When I look at the two of you, she said, her gaze sweeping back to me, her smile tightening just a fraction. I see. A moment. A lovely moment. She paused, letting the word "a moment" hang in the air, implying its fleeting nature. But when I think about the future, when I think about the legacy of this family, the Jimenez name, I have to be honest. Her eyes locked with our parents. I worry. The air went cold. This family, our family, is built on tradition, on strength, on moving forward, creating the next generation. It's about building something that lasts forever. Her voice dropped, becoming confiding, sincere, as if she were sharing a painful truth for our own good. And while Thomas's partnership is wonderful for him, personally, it represents a stopping point, a beautiful but terminal end to his branch of the family tree. It was a masterstroke of manipulation. In one fell swoop, she'd validated my relationship as a personal choice, only to invalidate it as a family contribution, framing my love for Daniel as a selfish indulgence that threatened the continuation of our bloodline. She was stoking the flames of their deepest, most traditionalist fears, and they were leaning in, soaking it all up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and list every single one of her hypocrisies, but I was frozen, watching this train wreck in slow motion, watching my own sister dismantle my life in front of our parents with the precision of a surgeon. And then she turned to me. The fake smile was gone. Her expression was now one of grave, serious intensity. It was the look of a queen about to pass a difficult but necessary judgment. "Thomas," she said, her voice dropping to an almost intimate whisper that still carried across the silent room. "I love you. You know I do. And that's why this is so hard." She took a breath, steeling herself. "You've had your fun. You've had 3 years with him. You've gotten to experience what it's like to be with a man of his caliber, and I'm happy for you. I truly am. It was a good trial run. A trial run." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. My life, my love, my home. It was a test drive for her. The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. I looked at Daniel, whose face was a mask of cold, controlled fury. I looked at my parents, who were just staring, confused, caught in the undertow of Avery's insane logic. She wasn't done. She took a step closer to the table, leaning forward as if to share a secret. "But now it's time to be serious. It's time to think about the family. It's time to think about what is best, not for one person, but for all of us. Daniel is a provider, a protector. He is the kind of man who can guarantee the Jimenez legacy continues with strength and stability. He is a high-value asset that is currently being misallocated." Misallocated. She said it. She actually said it. She had reduced my fiancé, the man I loved, to a line item on a balance sheet, a resource that was being wasted on me. The final pieces clicked into place. This wasn't about love or attraction. She didn't want Daniel the man. She wanted Daniel the symbol. She wanted the successful lawyer, the stable provider, the perfect accessory to her perfect life. She saw my happiness and didn't feel joy for me. She felt envy that I possessed something she believed should be hers by default. It was the ultimate expression of her golden child syndrome. Anything good that entered the family orbit belonged to her first. Her eyes bored into mine. All the warmth was gone, replaced by a chilling transactional hardness. This was it, the point of no return. "So you need to do the right thing, Thomas," she declared, her voice ringing with absolute conviction. "For the good of the family, you need to call this off." Silence. A pin drop, heart-stopping, world-ending silence. I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. I stared at her, trying to process the words, trying to understand how a human being could be so profoundly broken, so pathologically selfish. And then she delivered the final fatal blow. She looked at me, then at Daniel, and then back at me, a flicker of triumph in her eyes as she said the words that would echo in that room forever. "I deserve him more than you do." The silence that followed wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a physical thing. It pressed in on us, thick and heavy, sucking the air out of the room. My own heartbeat sounded like a drum against my ribs. I stared at my sister Avery, trying to find a flicker of shame, a hint of a joke, anything to suggest she hadn't just said the most monstrous thing I'd ever heard. But there was nothing, just the chilling certainty of a queen who had just claimed a new territory. My parents were frozen, their forks halfway to their mouths, their faces a perfect portrait of confusion. They looked from Avery to me, then to Daniel, as if waiting for someone to provide the correct translation for the insanity they just witnessed. But it was Daniel who broke the spell. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He slowly placed his napkin on the table, the sound of the linen hitting the wood echoing like a gunshot. He turned his head to face Avery, and the warmth that was usually in his eyes had been replaced by something glacial. "Avery," he said, his voice level and dangerously calm. "Let me be absolutely unequivocally clear. I am not an asset. I am not a prize to be won or a resource to be allocated. I am a man who is deeply in love with your brother. I am going to marry him. The only future I am interested in securing is the one I build with him." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Your demand is not only delusional, it is profoundly insulting to both me and the man I love." The answer is no. The conversation is over. It was perfect. A clean, decisive shutdown. He defended me, he defended us without a moment's hesitation. A wave of relief and love for him washed over me so strong it almost made me dizzy. For a second, I thought that would be it. How could anyone argue with that? But I had forgotten who I was dealing with. Avery wasn't a rational person. She was a black hole of entitlement, and Daniel's rejection wasn't a stop sign. It was fuel. Her face twisted not with embarrassment, but with frustration, like a child whose favorite toy had just been taken away. She completely ignored Daniel, turning her attention to the only court that had ever mattered in her life, our parents. "Did you hear that?" she cried, her voice rising with theatrical desperation. "Do you see how selfish he is? How selfish Thomas has made him? He's turning Daniel against the family. I am trying to build a legacy to give you grandchildren to do the right thing. And Thomas is standing in the way, all for his own selfish little lifestyle." She was actually crying now. Big fat crocodile tears rolled down her cheeks as she pointed a trembling finger at me. "He can't give you what I can. He can't give Daniel what I can. He's taking this wonderful man and leading him down a dead-end road, and he doesn't even care. He is stealing my happiness, my future, and he's doing it right in front of you." I watched in horror as my parents' expressions began to shift. The confusion was melting away, replaced by something far worse: indecision. My mother looked at Avery's tears, her face softening with that old familiar pity. My father looked at me, a flicker of disappointment in his eyes, as if I were the one causing this scene, the one being unreasonable. They were hesitating. After everything Avery had just said, after Daniel had laid his heart on the table, they were actually hesitating. They were weighing my lifetime of love and loyalty against the manipulative performance of their golden child. And in that moment, I felt a chasm open up beneath me. I was utterly and completely alone. Daniel was on my side, my rock, but in the context of my own family, I was an island. They were going to let her do this. They were going to let her tear my life apart because it was easier than telling her no for the first time in 27 years. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet, cold, final click. For years I had played the game. I had been the good son, the quiet one, the keeper of secrets. I had carried her burdens, absorbed her dramas, and protected her image, all in the name of family. But the family I was protecting didn't exist. It was a lie, a dysfunctional stage play where Avery was the star and I was just a prop. And I was done playing my part. Logic wouldn't work. Pleading wouldn't work. The only thing that would cut through this level of delusion was a truth so brutal, so undeniable, that it would burn the whole stage to the ground. She had built her entire identity on a foundation of lies, and she had given me the detonator years ago. I took a deep breath, letting the rage drain away, replaced by a strange surgical calm. I pushed my chair back slightly and picked up my water glass, taking a slow sip. Every eye in the room was on me. I set the glass down gently. "Mom, Dad," I began, my voice even. "Avery is talking a lot about what she deserves, about legacy and family values and what is best for the Jimenez name." I turned my gaze from my parents and locked eyes with my sister. The tears on her face hadn't dried yet. Her expression was one of smug anticipation, believing I was about to fold. She had no idea what was coming. The thing is, I continued, never breaking eye contact with her. It's hard to take a lecture on continuing the family line from someone who has actively and repeatedly chosen to end it. The confusion returned to my parents' faces. Avery's smugness wavered, replaced by a tiny flicker of panic. She knew where this was going. "You see, Avery has made me the keeper of her secrets for a very long time," I said to the room. "It's a heavy burden, and I don't want it anymore, so tonight I'm giving them back." I addressed my parents again. Avery's first secret, the one she told me about years later, happened when she was 19. A little inconvenient for her college plans, so she took care of it. No legacy there. Avery's face went white. Thomas, don't, she whispered the word barely audible. I ignored her. The second time when she was 22, she came to me in tears. She was so scared, so alone, and I was there for her. I held her hand through it all because that's what a good brother does. He keeps your secrets. He protects you even when you're ending another potential branch of the family tree. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father looked like he'd been struck, but I wasn't finished. And the third abortion, I said, my voice dropping, letting the weight of the words fill the room. The one she had just 2 years ago, when she was 25. That one cemented the trust she is now trying to use as a weapon against me. 3 times mom, 3 times dad, the golden child, the future of this family you're so worried about made a choice. 3 of them. The room erupted into chaos. Avery let out a choked sob, a sound of pure, unadulterated horror. Her carefully constructed world, her perfect image, her entire identity as the flawless daughter had just been vaporized in under a minute. Her face cycled through a storm of emotions, shock, panic, denial, and finally the raw, ugly terror of total exposure. My father shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the floor. But his fury wasn't directed at me. He was staring at Avery, his face a mask of disbelief and betrayal. Is this true? He demanded, his voice trembling with a rage I had never seen before. Avery just shook her head, unable to form words, the tears now flowing from a place of genuine agony. But her silence was an answer. My mother was openly weeping, looking at her daughter as if for the first time. The disconnect between the perfect child she thought she knew and the woman sitting before her was too much to comprehend. The entire power dynamic of our family, a structure that had been in place for nearly 3 decades, had just been inverted. Avery, the center of our universe, was now a pariah, isolated in the wreckage of her own lies. In the midst of the storm, I felt a warm, steady hand on my shoulder. It was Daniel. He stood beside me, a silent, powerful statement of unity. We were together. We were unbreakable. The victory didn't feel triumphant. It felt quiet, absolute. It was the grim satisfaction of a surgeon who had to perform a radical, painful amputation to save a life. My life. Slowly, Daniel and I stood up. The shouting and crying faded into background noise. My father was still demanding answers from a catatonic Avery. My mother was just staring into space. They hadn't even noticed we were leaving. I paused at the edge of the dining room, looking back at the ruins of my former family. We're leaving, I announced, my voice cutting through the noise. They all looked up. For what it's worth, I said, my gaze sweeping over my parents and landing one last time on my sister. I never wanted to do that. You forced my hand. You made me choose between your fantasy and my reality. I choose him. I looked at Daniel and he squeezed my shoulder. Our future, I said, speaking to him as much as to them, will be built on honesty and respect, things that this family clearly knows nothing about. And with that, we turned and walked away. We didn't run. We walked out of the front door, leaving the screaming and the crying and the shattered lies behind us. As the door clicked shut, sealing them in with the mess they had created, I felt the immense weight I had been carrying for years finally lift. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was a free one. And as we walked out into the cool night air, hand in hand, I knew we were walking toward a better life, one that we would build ourselves on our own terms. We had survived. We were whole, and that was more than enough.